Okay, last time we finished off with these Part B exclusions, the last thing that shows up in the slides for Part B is actually something I think you can ignore. Let me explain why I say that. So the other insurance provision for Part B, what I want you thinking when you see this, I want you thinking that the auto insurance other provision is insurance on the vehicle is primary, insurance on the driver is excess. That's what I want you to think. It's true, it's slightly different for Part B. So for the sake of accuracy, I guess it's not bad to put that in here, and you'll see that in the textbook when you're reading. But I don't want you to spend any time thinking about the differences in how we deal with other insurance provisions with Part B with respect to how we deal with them in Part A. I want you just thinking you see other insurance with auto insurance. If we've got two insurances that cover, insurance on the vehicle is always primary, insurance on the driver is always excess. So that's good enough for this particular slide. I wanted to move on to Part C. That's really what I wanted to talk about in this lecture. So Part C is uninsured motorist coverage. So think about this for a second, okay? If everybody carried auto insurance like they're legally required to, then uninsured motorist coverage wouldn't be necessary. Uninsured motorist coverage is only necessary because there's so many people who drive without auto coverage, even though that's against the law. And the statistics tell us it's about 15%. It's about 1 in 7. That's a lot of people driving without insurance. That means if you get into an accident and it's the other person's fault, there's a 1 in 7 chance they don't even have insurance. So it's their fault. They have to fix the damage. They're not going to have a way to do it. I mean, yeah, you can sue them, and I'm sure you'll win if it's their fault. But winning a judgment and collecting on a judgment are two different things. And in general, the people who don't have auto insurance don't have lots of other assets laying around that you can go after. They don't have a lot of money, and they just pay for losses out of pocket. That's not the problem. They don't have auto insurance because they didn't want to pay for it or didn't think they could afford to pay for it, even though it's the law. So how do you protect yourself against that? Here's the way you can protect yourself against that. You can buy uninsured motorist coverage on a first-party basis, meaning that I am paying for the possibility that someone else could do damage to me and is unable to pay for it. So I'm going to cover that myself. Sure, you got some coverage in Part B, but Part C is where we're going to get much higher limits of coverage that can protect against the possibility of serious bodily injury caused by somebody else. It's their fault, but they don't have auto insurance. And because of that, it's unlikely they have assets you're going to be able to go after in court and sue and collect. And that's a long process too. Uninsured motorist coverage is a lot quicker because you file the claim with your own insurance company. And the investigation will take a lot less time, and there's no arguing, or at least less arguing than there would be in an adversarial process where you had to sue somebody else. Okay, here's the thing though. Uninsured motorist only pays if the other person is legally liable and doesn't have insurance, right? I get into an accident, it's my fault. Yeah, uninsured motorist doesn't pay. That's not the situation. I have insurance, but if the accident is my fault, then I'm not going to be able to collect anything under Part C, and I'll just be limited to what I can collect under Part B, because remember, Part B happens without regard to fault. The problem with Part B is low limits, right? So then we have this rule that says, yeah, you might be eligible to collect something under Part B and the bulk of it under Part C. You don't get both. At least if you do, you don't get to double collect. So whatever you collect from Part B gets excluded from Part C. The easier way would just be to handle it all as a Part C claim because you'll have much higher limits. Here's the thing. Somebody runs into me. It's their fault. Their liability should pay. End of story. They don't have insurance. That's where I need Part C, uninsured motorist coverage. Most of the time in most states, it's only going to pay for bodily injury. And that can be really frustrating. Somebody runs into me and wrecks my car. It's their fault. They caused the accident. I want them to fix my car. They don't have any insurance. Well, okay, I got an uninsured motorist. Uninsured motorist only pays for bodily injury. We're going to find out that situation, somebody wrecks your car, you better have collision coverage. And that's Part D. We'll get there. But for now, we're just talking about uninsured motorist coverage, and that means in most states we are limited to bodily injury only. And again, that can be frustrating. If somebody damages you, they wreck your car, and they hurt you, Uninsured motorists will pay to fix you up. Uninsured motorists in most states will not pay to fix your car. That's something you have to cover as a collision claim. So what's really happening here is there's a shift in responsibility, and that's why people don't like this, right? I have to buy insurance to protect myself against the idiot who's driving on the road against the law without insurance. How's that fair? It's not fair. But we'll see when we talk about auto insurance in society, of all our options, this one might be the least bad. So I'm not happy about it, but it might be the best way of bad alternatives to try to handle that particular problem. We've already got a law, and that's one of the fallacies of control, right? We think, well, we can force people to do what we want them to do by passing laws, until people just decide on their own they're going to break the law. And this one's pretty common. 15% of people, they say, yeah, I know I'm supposed to have auto insurance. I'm not going to do it. All right, what do you do? That's a problem. So this is one of the responses to that problem. On a first party basis, you can buy uninsured motorist coverage to protect yourself from bodily injury in an auto accident that's somebody else's fault. Again, it's limited to bodily injury in most states. Property damage is a separate problem that we're going to handle under Coverage D. So who's covered under Part C? Guess what? It's the same as Part B. So if you're looking for an easy way to remember it, that's what I would suggest. The named insured and family members are covered in any auto, and then passengers in my car are covered. So uninsured motorist hits me and I've got other people in my car. My uninsured motorist will extend to cover the passengers in my car, up to the limits that I've chosen. And here you get to choose your limits. So that's one of the interesting things that happens with uninsured motorist is it's both a first party coverage and a third party coverage. It pays me primarily, it's primarily covering me, but it'll also pay for the passengers in my car, and that's other people. So it is first party and third party coverage, just like Part B is. Then we've got this new category that didn't show up in Part B, any person legally entitled to damages. And you say, well, who's that? What if I get killed in an accident that is the fault of an uninsured driver? Well, my spouse or my children might sue the uninsured driver for damages that amount to pain and suffering, loss of income. Those are legitimate damages, and uninsured motorists will actually extend to cover those damages. So sometimes people say, well, wait a minute, if I've got health insurance, then why do I need Part B or Part C? If I get hurt in an accident, and if I can't get somebody else's liability coverage to pay for it, I'll just have my health insurance pay for it. That is good enough for your bodily injury. It's true. You'll have a deductible you have to deal with. There might be a co-insurance that you're expected to pay. But it is true that for the most part, your bodily injury should be pretty close to fully handled by your health insurance. So people say, why do I need Part B or Part C? And it is an optional coverage. You don't have to buy it. This is a place that justifies buying Part C, this other person entitled to damages. So if I get hurt, injured, killed, let's say I'm injured and I have lost wages, I can't work. That's not something health insurance is going to concern itself with. Uninsured motorists would be a place where you could recover for that. Plus pain and suffering would be another possibility that you could recover under uninsured motorist, that health insurance doesn't pay for those things. So that's something that's interesting to realize, that even if you have health insurance, it still is probably to your advantage to think about buying uninsured motorist coverage to cover this possibility that somebody causes an accident, causes you bodily injury, and doesn't have a way to pay for it. Uninsured motorist is probably the easiest place where you can hope for that. So what's an uninsured vehicle? Well, we've been talking about it this whole time as if it's somebody who didn't buy auto insurance. So they're driving illegally without insurance. In reality, when you go to buy this coverage, there's two of them. There's uninsured motorist, and then there's underinsured motorist, which is just as big a problem. I've told you before how I feel about the state minimum liability limits, right? Well, that's underinsured vehicles, possibly, right? Somebody hits me, they have insurance, they're legal, but they've cost me more than $25,000 worth of damage. Well, now I got the same problem. The first 25, all right, they're going to pay for it. That's their insurer's limit. They're supposed to pay out of pocket, but realistically, for the rest, do they have that? If they've caused me $200,000 in damages, my guess is probably not. So the way we're handling it in this class, we're going to say that an uninsured vehicle and an underinsured vehicle are the same thing. But in reality, when you go to buy these coverages, you'll usually either buy both or neither. It's extremely rare for somebody to buy one but not the other, to buy uninsured motorist but not underinsured motorist. Although I suppose that would be possible if you could contrive a situation where that made sense. In general, people either buy both or they buy neither. And these are two separate lines of coverage when you go out to buy them on the market. We'll see that in the auto quote assignment. What else is an uninsured vehicle? Hit and run vehicle. Somebody hits me, causes me bodily injury, takes off. Well, yeah, we don't know who that is. If we can't find them, we can't go after their auto insurance. So we're going to handle that as if it's an uninsured vehicle. We handle that under uninsured motorist coverage. This last situation on the slide doesn't happen very often, but it could if you have an insurance company that goes bankrupt. Well, that's not really the driver's fault. I mean, they did what they were supposed to do. They paid their premium, they have their coverage. It's just their insurance company went bankrupt. So that means we know their claims aren't going to be paid. We're going to handle that as if it's an uninsured vehicle. That seems to be the easiest way to do that. So if the insurance company truly goes bankrupt, doesn't have money to pay their bills, to pay the claims of their legitimately insured drivers, then we have to handle that as an uninsured claim, uninsured motorist claim. Okay, let's see. We got exclusions to talk about here. So some of the exclusions, if you have a family member and they have primary insurance from another vehicle, then that family member does not have access to your uninsured motorist coverage unless you select what's called a stacking option. So you're going to see this in the auto quote assignment. You're going to say, what is this uninsured motorist stacking option? This is what it is. Somebody's got primary insurance from another vehicle and they're a passenger in your car. Do they get their insurance and your insurance? Do those limits stack on top of each other? Or is it the primary excess situation that we normally deal with? Remember, insurance on the vehicle is primary. Insurance on the driver is excess. Well, here we're going to flat out say, no, it's not excess at all. You've got your insurance from your vehicle and that's it. Unless you select this stacking option, and you will see that in the auto quote assignment. It's a very cheap option. $2 or $3 every 6 months is usually what the stacking option costs, because the idea that you're going to get hurt by an uninsured driver is kind of rare. And then number two, the idea that you're going to get hurt in an uninsured driver while you're in a different vehicle or while somebody else who has insurance from their policy is in your vehicle, even more rare. Right? So we can provide these stacking limits very, very cheaply because it's unlikely to happen. And then secondly, it's layered. It's the top layer. Remember that the top layers are always inexpensive to provide. So it should really only be a couple bucks to elect the stacking option. And once you start talking about that, you say, well, if I'm only going to save a couple dollars, how can I justify not having these limits stack? But the standard is if you don't do anything, the unendorsed policy says that family members who have primary insurance from another vehicle, that's where they get their coverage. They don't get it from you. We've got this cab exclusion again. So again, if you're in the business of running a taxi cab, and today it's a little different because now it used to be pretty clear when you were driving a cab that you were working for another company and you knew that you had an insurance issue that you had to deal with. Now that we've got the Uber and the Lyft and the other app-driven options, where you're delivering food, it's a whole different situation. It's really easy for people to take on liability and not realize that they are excluded in the standard auto policy. Again, we're talking about the personal auto policy. That's a standard form. It's approved for use in all 50 states. In that standard form, this exclusion exists. There are other forms that have been developed by big insurance companies, and then they had to pay the regulatory tax of going through and getting all their policies approved in every state where they wanted to do business. And so those might be different. So this is a question for your agent. If you're going to drive Uber, you're going to drive Lyft, and you have a question, am I covered? You got to go to your agent. They'll know. They'll know immediately in the details of the policy. Is it like the standard form where that's excluded? So for our class on the exam, yeah, cab exclusion is going to apply to all of our coverages. It's something you can endorse back in and you can get it covered. But most people are not doing this, so it's not fair to make everybody pay for it. And so that's why they exclude it out here. And we've seen this exclusion in Part A and Part B as well. So it shouldn't really be a surprise to see it here. Again, no reasonable belief of permission. So yeah, if you're driving somebody's car, your coverages will go with you when you're in any other car. But true, if you take somebody's car without permission, then that's going to be something where your coverages don't go with you. It's a big deal. Now, it's not enough for the other person just to say, oh, well, no, Kevin didn't have permission to drive my car. Not good enough. They're going to say, well, when you noticed it was missing, did you call the police and file a police report? Because your car had been stolen. Well, no. Okay, well then how did Kevin get the keys to drive your car? If you're not willing to call it stolen, if you didn't call it a police report and file it as stolen, then we're going to say that it sounds like you gave permission. So it's a pretty serious line there, and you're not able to get out of providing coverage to other people by saying, oh, well, they didn't have permission to drive my car. We're really trying to exclude the idea that, yeah, if somebody steals your car, yes, people drive your car, they're covered, not somebody who steals it. No, of course not. And that's what we're getting at with no reasonable belief of permission. The circumstances are going to matter. You know, here I'm trying to draw bright lines of distinction here, and in reality, you don't always have that. So any gray area, we've got to go to courts, and it's judges and juries that are looking at the facts of the case, and they're going to say, was it reasonable that this person had a belief that they had permission to drive or not? And it's impossible ahead of time to say what that determination is going to be. The last one that's excluded here, punitive damages. So somebody hits me, they don't have insurance, the court awards me general damages, right? Those can be measured. So I've got loss of wages, I've got medical expenses, things that we can add up and say these are the damages that I've suffered. They'll have to pay that. So uninsured motorist would pay for those kinds of losses. Punitive damages, no. So for some reason, a court decides that they want to punish the person and they award an additional layer of damages. Punitive damages always have to pay by the insured. They have to be paid by the insured. Insurance companies will never pay for punitive damages because that undercuts the whole point. The whole point with punitive damages is you're trying to punish the responsible party. So if you let insurance pay the penalty that you tried to impose on that person, you didn't punish them at all. And so to preserve the intent, insurance companies never cover punitive damages. So there's a question on the review sheet, what shows up as an exclusion under Part C that we haven't seen in Part A and B? This is it, punitive damages. They wouldn't be covered under Part A or Part B either, but you're just going to see it for the first time in Part C. So that's just something, a general rule of insurance that you're going to want to keep in mind. Insurance never pays for punitive damages. Okay, so that's good for Part C. Next up is going to be Part D, and we'll deal with that in the next lecture, that when we talk about coverage for damage to your auto, where we've got those two pieces that make this up. We've got collision, and then we've got other than collision, because there's losses that can happen and physically damage your vehicle that don't have anything to do with collisions. And there's some examples down here, and that's where we'll start the next lecture. So thanks a lot. If you've got questions, go ahead and send me an email, and I'm happy to clarify. Thanks a lot, you guys. We'll go from there.